All right, guys, welcome to the shop. Let's get straight into this. Right off the bat, I want to make this clear that I am by no way promoting polishing vintage axe heads. And I want to show you something. Here's why, okay? And this goes for if you're kind of new into axes and if you're selling axe heads, okay? If you get an axe head that's got, you know, some pitting and pretty severely rusted like this, and you go, oh, well, I'm gonna polish it up and make it look good, and then I'm gonna sell it. Vintage axe collectors don't want to buy polished heads. They wanna do whatever they wanna do themselves. They wanna make that decision. So when you're stripping the rust and stripping the patina off of a head, you're taking away, kind of like opening a Christmas present, right? So this video is about polishing an axe head. When to polish an axe head, when not to polish an axe head, what does polishing an axe do, okay? And this all came about kind of as a response to some comments that I was getting on a video that I did, a short that I did when I had polished this axe head. This is a splitting axe. So most of this, what we're talking about right now, pertains to splitting, and that can transfer over to chopping or felling a tree. Now in the comments, the argument was that reducing surface space, i.e. having all these forge marks be in contact with the wood and the part that is deeper in, those divots are not in contact, actually reduces friction. That's not the truth. Surface contact area has nothing to do with friction. That's just how it is, and let's get into this. So why do we want to polish an axe head? It reduces friction, okay? It does a couple other things also, but it makes it split better, okay? The force that you put into the swing can go deeper in and split further apart, reducing the amount of calories that you're gonna use, okay? So that's the gist of it. So first off, we gotta look at what is friction. So there's two types of friction that we're looking at when it comes to splitting. Number one is sliding or kinetic friction. Now in basic terms, this is directly from the dictionary. It's the resistance that one surface or object encounters when moving over another. Now when we're splitting firewood, you can times that by 2 because you've got it on each side of the axe, right? So the two factors when you're calculating friction to find the coefficient of friction is number one, the texture of the surface, okay? How rough it is. The smoother the surface, the lower the coefficient of friction. That's just how it is. There's YouTube videos out there, there's math books, there's science books, physics books, all of that stuff will tell you every single time, except when it is two metal surfaces, if they're polished overly smooth, something happens, molecular bonding, some science shit happens, and it can actually increase in friction. But that is a very unique trait that happens with metal on metal contact, okay? So back to it, the texture of the surface and the normal force. So the normal force could be considered, so the normal force could be seen as the force perpendicular to the motion that you're trying to achieve, okay? So we're splitting down, so our normal force is the pressure that a firewood round is pushing in, it's holding together. We're trying to split that apart, right? So our normal force is in the thousands of pounds, you know, on bigger stuff. We look at a 28-ton wood splitter, right? So we have a tremendous amount of normal force coming in here. And that's why I feel it's so important to reduce the factor of the roughness the best that we can and get it as smooth as we can. Now, the standard for testing to find the coefficient of friction is basically, if you have a piece of wood and you have an axe head, you would put that piece of wood on the axe head, obviously on the bit, right? And you would get, I don't know, like a trigger pound tester, and you'd hook it on that and see how many pounds it takes to pull it across, okay? That's gonna give you data to come up with the coefficient of friction. Now, we're not gonna get into that in this video, but I got a feeling that down the road, we're gonna be doing some testing to see just exactly how much force we can reduce on our side to get the axe to do more work for us, right? That's what it's all about to me. I've split 4.5 cords of softwood this year, and if I can do it faster and more efficient, I want to. The other force is static friction, okay? Well, what is static friction? Static friction, any of you guys that have actually split enough wood and put some frickin' muscle into it and you're just going ham trying to get it, you'll get your axe stuck, okay? And you're lifting it up, you lift the whole firewood round up, you can't get the axe out. So you go to kicking it or stomping on the handle, you know, and you're trying to break that friction, okay? That's static friction. Static friction is the force that holds the object in place and keeps it from moving until you apply enough force to break that static friction. Now obviously everything that we're talking about here, there's a lot of other factors with this, and especially on the concept of reducing the surface area, okay? If you're changing the pattern, obviously that's going to change how it splits the log, and you know, maybe if it's wider, it doesn't go in as far, okay? You know, if it's a really thin bit, it just buries in. Imagine taking an ice pick and going down with the same amount of force as a 4.5 pound axe. You're gonna bury that ice pick like 2 feet into the log, okay? So what I'm talking about here is the same pattern. We're not changing that pattern in this concept here, okay? All right, so we've talked about some times when not to polish an axe, and that is, I want to touch that again, okay? If you take something like this, okay, this old True Temper Perfect, right? And I cleaned this on a wire wheel, and it's still a little rough. It's still got some pits in it. But you take something like this and you polish it, and then go post it on Reddit, the Axecraft subforum, okay? It's your axe, you do what you want with it, and that's number one thing that we got to think about here, is you do whatever you want with yours. If you're reselling vintage axes, or if you expect to maintain value in them, you are devaluing that axe when you go and start grinding on it, polishing it, removing paint, modifying it, all of those things, okay? So we don't want to do that. So another time that you don't want to polish an axe and you actually want to increase the coefficient of friction would be on a throwing axe, okay? On a throwing axe. Now, not so much the kinetic friction of it going in, because we want it to go in. So what we want is static friction. And the reason why is when that axe comes in, boom, and it hits, and then it falls out, and you lost points, okay? So we want it to stick. We don't want to drop. Now, what makes it stick? Static friction. So you can play with that, and if you jump online, you'll see, you know, different people kind of, you know, debating over which way you want the grind marks to go to maintain or increase that static friction to keep it in the cut, or to keep it in the target, right? So another point would be, where's it at? No, okay, here it is. Now I don't have a lot of experience with the splitting wedges. I've done a little bit of split rail cedar for fencing, and when I was younger I used this on some oak, not this specific one. Someone in the comment section brought it up, and they said that you actually want a rougher tip of a wedge because it sticks in the log. If you're splitting some heavy, you know, some heavy oak or hickory or whatever it is, you're gonna hammer this thing in and it's just gonna keep popping out, kind of like a splinter, right? When you're popping a splinter out, that's what it's doing. So you want it to get in there and you want it to stay. So that's gonna be your static friction. Now with that, I believe I've seen some splitting wedges that have actual kind of like barbs, right? Little wedges coming up. So it'll go in easy enough, but it's going to be hard to get it out, which could kind of be a double-edged sword, right? So another reason to not polish an axe, okay? if you're a boutique axe brand like Grantsfors Brooks, and you've convinced your customers that those rough forge marks somehow make a better axe, then you're going to want to leave some forge marks on the axe. Grantsfors Brooks actually used that as a technique to sell their axes for more money, all while doing less work, okay? And the concept is you can see the craftsmanship of the axe. And I get it, if you're a weekend warrior and you pull your axe out, once a year or so and you go chop a branch off a tree just so you can feel like a man, I get it. It looks cool. I like the look of those axes too. If you're a vintage axe collector, okay, or if you're a vintage axe seller, you're gonna wanna leave that pitting, you're gonna wanna leave that rust, okay? All of those things that are gonna slow you down or slow the axe down in the cut, you wanna leave that, because really, in all actuality, the vintage axe movement has evolved into more of an artistic movement than it has, I would say functional artistic movement. As before, 10, 15 years ago, people were looking at this as an opportunity to get high quality steel, a good user axe for really cheap. And then people started appreciating the history behind it. And next thing you know, prices are through the roof. Those two examples show that it is more valuable to have a slower axe that looks cool than it is to have an efficient axe. And somebody that hasn't polished their axe, hasn't used their axe and then polished it and then use it after that, you're not gonna know if it does any better. I know myself, personally, I believe that this axe right here splits 10% better after I polished it. And a big factor in that is the static friction of pulling it out. This thing would just get stuck and I would be kicking on it, okay? Now, this thing, it goes in and you just a quick little whip of the handle and it pops right back out, okay? So I know. Now, like I said, we may get into some testing. We may check that out. I got a feeling that's coming. I'm not gonna argue about the looks of patina, the looks of pitting, the looks of forge work. I love it. That stuff is beautiful. I really do enjoy it. But for a user, there's no question in my mind that polishing the area of the bit that sinks into the wood reduces friction and makes the axe cut better. So with that, I'm out of here. Hope you guys have a good day. I'll see you on the next one.